Welcome everyone that is tuning in and watching this panel recording. I'm super excited to present this unique learning opportunity to connect my Marketing 307 consumer behavior students with some of the best marketers here in the Boeing Global Services crew. So first, just want to say thanks to all of our panelists joining us. We got David, Stacy, and Steven, so the A team, and I appreciate the time that they're spending for today's chat. In anticipation for this event, my students submitted a bunch of questions. And so I had the opportunity to go through those questions and curate a list of 10 that we will kind of guide our journey throughout the panel and for today's Q&A. Before we jump in, I think it's important to clarify to the students watching that within Boeing, we're comprised of three major divisions. There's Boeing Commercial, Boeing Defense, and Boeing Global Services. And just to kind of summarize that briefly, for Boeing Commercial, just think of all the impressive aircraft and fleets we have for the airlines. And then for Boeing Defense, Space and Security, just think about military aircraft and all of those capabilities that come with it in those arenas. And then Boeing Global Services, that's where we live and where we operate out of, which is anything and everything after an aircraft is produced and in production. We handle from training, aircraft services, digital services, part replacement, all kinds of things. And so that's our kind of realm and bread and butter. So keep that in mind and that perspective in mind as we hear from the panelists today. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. So the first thing I want to ask our panelists is to introduce themselves. If y'all can just give your name, role at the company, your major in college, and then I'd be curious if that journey you had in college influenced your way into marketing, or if it did not. That's totally fine as well. But how did you first get started in this field? So let's start with Steven to kick it off, and then we'll go David and Stacy to round out this first one.
Excellent. Awesome, Brad. Well, thanks for having us. Hey, everybody. My name is Steven Nelson. I'm the Senior Manager of Digital Growth and Demand for Boeing Global Services. So my team is primarily responsible for supporting our portfolio marketing teams with their go-to-market efforts, specifically through digital channels, and engaging our target accounts and customers through those channels. My major in college was actually public relations for undergrad, and I kind of stumbled into marketing because back in the day, digital marketing wasn't really a thing. It was just starting to emerge. So I really started in the PR space and then kind of stumbled into this as part of a boutique firm that I was working for in Dallas. But fast forward, to 2026, and here I sit at Boeing, kind of living the dream because I've been an aviation geek my entire life, and just got my master's in aviation management, which is super cool. But yeah, the field of marketing, super dynamic, always changing. So, it's been a fun ride. And I'll kick it over to David.
Thanks, Stephen, and thanks, Brad, for the opportunity here. My name is David McGowan, and I lead what's called customer and market engagement for Boeing Global Services. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about what some of those characteristics represent. I did major in marketing, and I should caveat that by saying I majored in marketing and political science because I had every intent to go into campaign management and political advertising. And then I had the opportunity while in college to work on a political campaign, and I realized how corrupt it was and how it definitely did not suit me. So I shifted everything and just went full bore into marketing. And I have really been in marketing roles my entire career, from sporting goods to telecommunications to 18 years with the Boeing company. And Stacy.
Yep. Thanks, David. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Stacy Ito, and I'm based in our Seattle office, and I work for Steven. My role on the team is I manage our paid media, so search, display, and social for our various portfolios in our Boeing Services division. And then my major in college actually was marketing. I got my start in market research, so that was really fun. Got to work for a lot of different clients like Nike and Alaska Airlines, another airline client, and then worked a couple other jobs before coming to Boeing, and I've been at Boeing here for about 7 years.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Stephen, David, and Stacy for the intro. Got some great representation on the panel. So one of the first questions that a student asked me when they were submitting and thinking of what they could ask for this panel was kind of this fun trivia-esque question. They wanted to know what the fastest plane in Boeing's product line was and what made it that fast. And so, of course, I had to do some homework, and it's easy to nerd out on these things. So I'll break it into two parts to answer this question. just to have everyone start on a fun open-ended one here. For Boeing Commercial, our fastest jet right now, they're still in service today, but production did end in January of 2023. And so the fastest Boeing commercial jet goes to the 747-8, and it can approach Mach 0.9, which is just over 700 miles per hour. And then on the flip side for Boeing Defense, the fastest military plane in service right now is the F-15 Eagle II, which is also known as the F-15X, and that was developed in 2010, and it's still the crown jewel for military speed in service today. So it's capable of speeds greater than Mach 2.5, which is close to 2,000 miles per hour, 1,900 to be approximate. And for all the Top Gun fans out there, that is faster than the Super Hornets. Those get up to Mach 1.6. And so the second part of this question was what makes it the fastest? Well, we're in marketing, so I'm not as close to the mechanics and engineering side of it. But for what I found in the research, it really comes down to two things: a combination of design choices and then some of the components within the aircraft. So for that F-15X, there's two specific General Electric engines that they use, and each produce over 29,000 pounds of thrust with the afterburner, which is pretty unique in a performance capability that not many other fighter jets have. So easy to go down a rabbit hole and nerd out over this stuff, but I wanted to start on a loose end there, just to give you all some fun facts about some of the cool products that we make here at Boeing. But now, for the rest of the panel, double clicking into more of the marketing lens, I wanted to ask you all what the day-to-day looks like for a marketer in this space. So I'll start with Stacy, and then we'll hand it off to David and Stephen to round it out.
I'd say my day-to-day is depending on where the projects are or campaigns that we have in market, it'll be checking in on those. So if we started, it might be getting the creative ready, the ad copy ready, looking over the targeting list, et cetera. For ones that are in flight, it's basically checking those, and making sure, looking at the data, trying to make optimizations. A lot of my day is spent either trying to gather all the materials we need for our marketing campaigns or facing with the agency on our various projects and checking in on the status of those and what we might need to launch them. And then also checking in with our, broader team here on our digital growth and marketing team on various projects I'm working on with them and the status of new ones that might be coming up.
Great, yeah.
And on my team, again, customer and market engagement, really what that involves is identifying the different ways that we're going to connect with our customers within the market. So it could be everything from event management and then determining the strategy and how we're going to position ourselves at an event to creative and design and how we want to position ourselves, whether it's at an event, in a video, in an advertisement, you name it. And so it kind of spans a lot of different things. I wouldn't say that there is a typical day in the life of what my job is, because it really kind of depends on the trade show season. It depends on whatever the latest customer campaign that we're working on may be. But by and large, it's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of conference calls, and it's a lot of thinking. And it's a lot of kind of dreaming up what the next really compelling story could be to really leverage the Boeing Global Services portfolio. It is one of the fun parts of my job, but it is one of the more stressful parts of my job, because with so many things going on, you can easily get distracted. And before you know it, you're on this path and you're building out a story that you think is going to be the next best thing, and then something else kind of comes at you from the left side and derails that. So there's not a lot of consistency in what my team really does on a daily basis. But at the end of the day, it's all about telling the story of Boeing Global Services to the market. And Stephen.
Yeah, I like what David said, because no 2 days look alike. I feel like each day is full of surprises and full of its unique challenges. Certainly never a dull moment in our day-to-day, that's for sure. Kind of going back to what Stacy said, my day-to-day mirrors her day-to-day in a lot of ways. Paid media is a core function on digital growth and demand, along with several others like email marketing, reporting and analytics, Brad, which very intimately, And we also have strategists on the team that are supporting really two distinct parts of the business that, in my day-to-day, I have to keep a pulse on. So we have our e-commerce programs that are really focused on driving direct transactions with our e-commerce businesses that are online selling products to customers directly. And then the other half of my team is really focused on pipeline quality and growth. So supporting a large swath of our portfolios that have complex buying cycles, but still require that in-market engagement, promotion, and demand driving for those offerings that we have in the BGS portfolio. So, my tentacles, if you will, are kind of spread all over the place and kind of keeping a pulse on the programs that are, in development, the programs that we have in market. Brad, working closely with you and your counterpart on the analytics side to keep track of how those programs are performing, making sure that we're driving informed optimizations, and then also making sure that we're doing our due diligence from a technology and capabilities perspective. That's a big focus area for us right now. And we've got a couple of team members that are really hyper-focused on onboarding new technologies that are going to enable certain go-to-market approaches, making sure that we have the analytics architecture that is constantly evolving with our programs and market. So there's quite a bit that we're tracking on a day-to-day basis, but I think, the key thing is, cross-collaboration, cross-functional collaboration, and making sure that we're, keeping things on track and having transparent conversations on a day-to-day basis around blockers, risks, dependencies that are popping up, some that are certainly anticipated, some that might hit you as a surprise, but that's what we spend most of our day doing, is just working through those challenges and keeping things going.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to reiterate a couple key points that I heard from you all is that, yeah, no 2 days are alike. There's always something that'll come up to, either change a plan that was originally set, but it's important to be nimble, to be agile, to adapt with where the market's going, and kind of the campaigns that we have out there. And to build on some of Steven's points there, just looking at the numbers from last year, right, we were closing in on 150 campaigns alone within our team, which we're just one part of the major sales and marketing function, right? So a lot of opportunities, a lot of diversity, a lot of initiatives, and great things going on. So as you can imagine, most of my students are in their junior year of school, and so they're just getting started with their first internship, and they're just trying to get out there and see what it's like in the field of marketing. And so those answers were super helpful and informative. So thanks for sharing that. Building on the idea of a campaign just a little bit more here, what would you say are all the key inputs needed to hit the ground running and to be successful on a marketing campaign? Like if you had to sum up an ingredient list or the secret sauce that makes it successful, what would that be? So I'll kick this one over to Steven and Stacy if you two want to tackle this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brad, I'm going to miss some major points because I think there's a lot of key inputs that we're looking for right off the bat, when we're talking about a go-to-market effort or campaign. The first thing I'll say is, as a marketer, you really want to know the product intimately. I think that's really, really important because yes, you're promoting that product, but you have to understand how the end customer is going to use that product. What problem is it solving for them? What need is it fulfilling? So all of those aspects of the product, how it's positioned in market, are really important to understand up front. So that's the kind of product differentiation, competitive positioning aspect of that. Then you really need to understand, who are you targeting? Who are your customers at the end of the day? One thing that we've really started to lean into here at BGS is this notion of buying groups. We work within a B2B space, and so there are multiple people on the customer side that we want to engage with, but we want to engage with them in different ways. And so that's where you really get into personas that are part of that buying group. You might have end users, you might have team members that are really focused on procurement, you might have info security involved in that buying group. There's a number of different functions, and they all have different interest points that you have to identify and really be able to speak to those individuals in order to drive, toward that ultimate sale, which is what we're trying to do from a marketing standpoint. Beyond that, I think it's also understanding, where the customers are, right, in their journey, and making sure that you are acknowledging what phase of their buying journey they're in. Maybe also thinking about the areas that they're already engaged with your brand or your business and how you can meet them there and engage them with this messaging. And then, of course, I think probably table stakes is, what kind of budget are we working with, right? And really helping the various teams involved kind of right size that budget so that we're effectively going to market with the right investment. And we can leverage all of the different tools in our marketing tool set to make that a success. So I'll kick it over to Stacy with that. I'm sure there are more things that she can get into the weeds about. But Stacy, please.
Yeah, and to further clarify what Stephen was mentioning too, is just when you're identifying the target market, what companies are we going after? What kind of job titles? What keywords might they be looking for? Really trying to understand how they might be looking for our products. And then also to making sure that we have good creative in market that might resonate. So, and enough creative so we can do testing on it. So whether it's images or ad copy, things like that. And then understanding where are we driving those folks to? Do we have a good experience for them? What's on the landing page? Making sure the creative aligns with the landing page messaging. And then really to then making sure everything is QA'd and we have the right things, and then to make sure we're also to what's the competition doing? So Stephen alluded to that as well. Our market is very competitive, so I do some research up front, like for our parts and distribution side, looking at the competitors, who else might be bidding, what's their messaging, how are we differentiating ourselves in the market? So I think those are some of the key elements. And then I forgot the most important one is right up front, understanding what are the goals and objectives. What are we trying to do? How many orders? How much revenue? What's the opportunity? So we can understand what success looks like for our particular portfolios in our business.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those answers, and I think the goals can definitely be informed by like knowing the customer intimately and knowing their needs and their problem statements, right? So I think you both hit on it perfectly. There's one thing we're doing in class right now. It's called the Brand Performance Lab, is what I guess named it or titled it. And essentially, they're in teams and they're representing a brand and they're following them throughout the semester, but they're also like building consumer behavior skills along the way. So we just did a whole segment on persona building and getting them to really understand who the target customers are for their respective brands. And then ultimately it's going to shape into decision like journey mapping and then building strategic recommendations eventually and how they can kind of help those customers from a more strategic lens. So I thought, yeah, your answers were spot on to what we're really in the crux of right now in the classroom too. So love to hear that. Moving on to the next question here, we got from one student. They want to know more on the marketing budget side of things. What is the most important thing to consider or evaluate when managing a marketing budget? David, I'll start with you, and then Stephen, if you want to add in anything as well. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, Stephen is probably a little bit closer to the day-to-day budget management, given the digital marketing work that he does and a lot of the campaigns that his team is focused on. A lot of the budgetary oversight that I have within my team is as it relates to events. And events are a very significant cost to the Boeing Global Services business. When we look at an event, there are two things that are more important than anything else. It's return on marketing investment and it's return on marketing objective. And marketing can be really, really difficult because when you're dealing with an event, let's just say the latest event was the Singapore Air Show. Do we track our success based on the sales generated at the show directly? Well, it's very rare that we are going to have transactional revenue at an event like a Singapore Air Show. There's going to be opportunities that are born at an event like that, and we can track over time, and then on a long-term basis be able to understand our effectiveness. But then we have to look at other measures, and so that's where the return on marketing objectives come into play. So how many people did we want to interact with? How many demonstrations were we going to give? How many contacts were generated? All those types of things. And we track all of those. And sometimes it's just difficult just from a budget standpoint to say, okay, well, we were able to return X number of dollars of our budget based on the incremental sales. But that's in large part where at an event, we're trying to drive traffic in a lot of cases to what Stephen and his team are doing from a digital standpoint. And when we pass that over to them, I'll let Stephen kind of talk about how they track it from there.
Yeah, and I think David hit the nail on the head. It's all about return on investment, especially from a digital perspective. Everything that we do is measurable. So we rely quite a bit on historic data, and specifically the efficiency metrics that we can leverage to determine, what is our cost per lead or cost per acquisition or cost per purchase. There's a number of metrics depending on what type of program you're running, that you can look at to kind of ballpark, how much investment it's going to take to drive a specific outcome. And I think that's one of the more important aspects of marketing budgets is, really understanding what is the outcome that we need to drive, what's the market opportunity that we have. If a product marketing team or product line manager comes to us and says, hey, we need to generate X amount of revenue for this product, that immediately starts to fire off a number of questions in our head, right? It's like, okay, so how much of the product do we have on the shelf that we need to sell? Then we can start looking at historic data and understand, any of our ROI metrics, return on ad spend or cost per acquisition, and really start to kind of estimate out, what it's going to take essentially, and then go make that budget request. The one thing that I'll add is, marketing budgets are super complex. To David's point, there's marketing budgets going into events marketing, into digital marketing, content marketing. There's multiple fronts, and I think striking a balance is important, and also the allocation of that budget is important, and knowing where your hotspots are. I think for us as an organization, events marketing has been such a key piece of what we do in a go-to-market effort to really lean into that and make sure that those event experiences are engaging and rememberable, and then also balancing that out with how our growth looks in the digital space and making sure that we're appropriately and efficiently investing in those channels that can render those direct conversions and track transactions.
Yeah, absolutely. I second that. Like that the budget side is very complex. There's a lot of variables, but then on my side as well, when it comes to reporting and attributable tracking, incremental revenue, when it comes to even things outside of just direct like revenue gains from campaigns, it's like there are so many different KPIs and stories to be told. So not always straightforward and cut and dry as it might seem when setting up a budget. So appreciate the insight there. On this next one, we got. Oh, go ahead, Stacy. Yeah.
Oh, Brett, sorry to keep interrupting. I was going to add too, in terms of what can throw a wrench in the budget is, a lot of times in paid search, it's very competitive. So we want to make sure that we're maintaining a good share of voice and not losing share of voice, lost the budget. Same thing too for social and LinkedIn. I've seen it's become more competitive, and so the costs are rising. So just kind of keeping a pulse on how do we balance our return on our investment versus what the competition is doing and what our share of voice is out there in the market too.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like maybe targets and budgets are set towards the beginning of the year, but then as you go through the year, monitoring that performance and then being, adjustable or adaptable to, the environment and what you're seeing is equally as important. So reacting pretty quickly and being proactive within the dollars you have is, yeah, absolutely. Good point. Okay, this next question was really from the perspective of Boeing versus Airbus, and while that may be more of a competition directly in the commercial space, as we talked about in the beginning, within Boeing Global Services, there's very much a different dynamic competitive landscape at play. So I'd like to ask, David, how do you see Boeing differentiating the brand from other competitors in our global services space?
Sure, and I actually don't want to lose sight over that first question, the specific around Boeing versus Airbus, because there is a book out there that you can probably get on Amazon. It's called Boeing versus Airbus, and it is incredibly insightful around kind of the rise and fall of both companies throughout the years and the brand wars that they've had, et cetera. So I highly recommend picking up that book if you want to learn more about that dynamic between Boeing and Airbus. But Brad, as you said, the competitive landscape within services is enormous. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of competitors in the spaces that we operate in. And each one of our business units kind of have their own competitive differentiation. So for example, we have 4 different businesses. One of the businesses, parts and distribution, their value proposition is really all around depth and breadth. And it's about making sure that we have the right part at the right place at the right time, able to be shipped. And we support 5 distinct customer markets: commercial, military, business, general, and vertical lift. And we do that through 16 million available parts, and we ship over 1 billion parts every single year. that makes our parts footprint absolutely enormous. And that's exactly what our customers want. They want that high reliability and availability. And that's one of the things that we can deliver. From a cabin modifications and maintenance standpoint, it's really our intellectual property, which is our key differentiator. I mean, as the OEM, nobody can really compete with us and knows the Boeing aircraft better than we can. And so that's a really important value proposition that we can bring to the table. Digital services is really all around the intelligence of the aircraft, and our predictive maintenance solutions are our key differentiator. We're able to identify problems on board an aircraft before any physical interaction or human can identify, and that's all done through the intelligence around the different software and services that we have. And in a lot of cases, it results in significant savings in revenue generation for the operators. And kind of in a similar note to cabin modifications and maintenance, but our commercial training solutions, as the OEM, as the builder of these aircrafts, nobody knows how to operate these aircrafts better than we do. And our connection with BCA and being able to leverage the sale of an aircraft and being able to add the training component to that sale of the aircraft gives us a very unique rise against our competitors. When you look at Boeing Global Services as a collective, we're a $21 billion entity of the Boeing company, and that actually makes us the largest aviation services provider in the world. So we've got a lot going for us.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things. I love explaining to people that, Boeing, there's so much more that meets the eye, right? When you just think of the brand Boeing, especially people that aren't within our landscape, right? They don't realize the depth of all the markets that we're in, and the depth of just all the parts we offer and services we offer. I mean, there's millions of parts, right, on our e-commerce pages. There's millions of parts that make up a plane. Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. So appreciate you going into a bit more detail there. Does anyone want to add anything to this one before we move on to the next?
Like David hit
a lot of times. I was just going to add, a lot of times in some of our ad copy and things like that, really leaning in on our experience. So, hey, we've had our 100th landing gear exchange. We have an OEM, because we manufactured the plane, our experience there with our engineering expertise. If you're going to do some sort of a landing gear exchange with us, or repair service, things like that, or our 100-year experience in the aviation business in itself, especially for parts and other things like that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Awesome. Great insights there. I think kind of piggybacking off of this last question, since we're in so many markets and we're competing with so many competitors, I think it's important to enable personalization right within our digital offerings and digital marketing campaigns. And so, Stephen, I'd like to just ask you, how does Boeing tailor messaging for different audience segments? Maybe how do we target engineers versus airline execs, all the different buying groups I think you alluded to a little bit earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does go back to those complex buying groups that we're often targeting and engaging with, and understanding those buying groups intimately. And I would also go as far as to say, there's no two buying groups that are the same, because it really kind of comes back to what product are you trying to market and sell to them? And then understanding, again, the different roles that are going to interact or benefit from that product, once they buy it and it's onboarded or, delivered to them in whatever capacity that looks like. And I think that's the most important part about tailoring and personalizing messages, is understanding the buying persona's perspective. For executives, they're going to have higher level focus areas and concerns and interests than somebody who is a frontline engineer or an end user, or somebody who might be influencing those decisions. Every buying persona is going to have a different focus, and you have to tailor your message to align with that. And I think this is something that BGS has been maturing around a great deal over the last 2 or 3 years, where we've really started to exercise the different kind of measurement approaches with NPS scores, and also just tracking the engagement and the behavior. I think Stacy alluded to something earlier that's kind of an important component to personalization. That's understanding, what are people doing online? What are they researching? Are there specific problems that they're researching? AI, which I'm sure we'll get to later, is really kind of busting the door down in terms of online research, but that is a really important tool to tap into and use that as leverage to understand, what messaging strategy do we need to develop around this product or this portfolio. And then I'll add, personalization is really a capability that is enabled through, and I should say scaled through technology, but you can't have personalization without the messaging strategy and without the content being in place, ready to go. If you don't have that, then personalization is really not going to work. The technology is just going to be almost kind of rendered useless. And I think that's an important thing to kind of separate for students in their mind, that there's a technology component to personalization, which we're doing today. I think one of the cooler things that we've been doing for about 2 years at this point is personalizing content on our web properties. So when somebody lands on our website, we have the backend systems to identify who that person is, what have they engaged with prior, and try to serve up content to them that is relevant to their interest or in line with their behavior. And that's just scratching the surface. What we can do with that at scale is pretty incredible when you think about it. So the technology component's important, but again, it's really the messaging strategy and making sure that you understand your customers intimately and have that messaging strategy aligned to each of those personas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really exciting to see like the possibilities in the space. I think some companies are getting to the point, right, of hyper personalization as well, and I know that's something we want to get to in due time. Is like that one-to-one personalization where you can, like you just said there, pick up the cues, know who they are as they're coming onto our sites, and then give them a creative offering that is direct to them and it's personal to them. So it's super exciting to see where we're going in this space, and it leverages a little bit of AI and the tools like you said, but it of course needs that strategy with it. Awesome. Anyone else want to just add any closing points on this one on personalization? Okay. You did allude to it in the last question. We are going to get to AI. That is the nature of this next question. And funny enough, we just had a whole class conversation. That was literally last night's class was all about AI in marketing, essentially, and talking about some of the capabilities and some of the things that they could do with it. So I guess the question here is AI used for anything currently in our space or in the work that you're doing today? I do want to hear a little bit from each individual's perspective. So we'll go around the room here and start with Stephen, and then David and Stacy to close it off.
Yeah. AI is the next frontier, and it can feel, I think, intimidating for marketers right now because there's so much coming to market, so many capabilities, so many new technologies or existing technologies that we use today trying to incorporate AI in their platforms. So it can feel overwhelming, and I kind of think about and this is going to, I think, date us, but when social media was emerging, it was kind of that same feeling of like, okay, there's this new way to engage people, this new way of reaching the world. And this advent of AI kind of feels similar in that it's like going to accelerate exponentially, and we have to kind of keep up with best practices and what our competitors are doing in market and what our customers are doing with AI as well. So, from a marketing perspective, AI, and I would say generative AI is a big hot topic right now. I talked about content a second ago around personalization. To get content generation at scale is really difficult to do today because a lot of us are working with slim resources, especially in the content marketing space. And I think Gen AI presents an opportunity to accelerate that, to deliver on that personalization goal that we have, where it's real-time dynamic personalization and having the content to support that. And then I think you're also seeing use cases of AI emerge in some of our existing technology solutions. So, agentic AI is a hot topic right now, and how we can essentially automate points of engagement with our customers and take that burden off of a human resource internally and accelerate that engagement with the customer, get them to the next point of conversion, or try to solve their problem through some sort of automated system that is built intelligently around customer needs. And then I know there's a lot, and this is probably a good segue to Stacy, a lot that we have been doing from a machine learning and AI standpoint in our paid media space, and understanding, what systems and what strategy needs to be in place to essentially deliver those messages at the right time in the right place to our customers. And that's something that we've been exercising for some time in the paid media space. But again, just scratching the surface, because I think when you take a step back and you look at how AI is going to impact marketing, it's going to be significant. And we have to really think about workflows and process, so that when we are trying to implement these things, we're doing so with long-term, success in mind, and we're not kind of fumbling over the new technology and not dedicating ourselves to learning and adapting to it.
It's funny because I was sitting there thinking while Stephen was talking, because 2 years ago, Stephen and I attended a Forrester conference in Austin, and AI, which was, very much in its kind of infancy stage 2 years ago, was one of the main stage topics. And one of the things that I think was a buzz among the crowd was, this is going to take all these marketing jobs away. This is going to replace everybody in this room, and this fear, et cetera. And I think I kind of got affected by that myself. And I walked away from that feeling a little bit actually deflated. And then once I started seeing the way that AI has been applied in different ways and seeing how it can really augment and support, as Stephen mentioned earlier, from a content standpoint, we're really lean in the content space. In terms of resources to be able to develop content. But now through generative AI, we can utilize tools like that to be able to take existing data sources that we have and create even more value out of it. So what was once pretty scary has now become pretty exciting.
I would say too, in terms of our ad technology and other things, some of our partners like Google, Demandbase, et cetera, I'm not going to lie, have scanned our landing page with ChatGPT and asked, hey, what would be some of the salient headlines we could pull out or descriptions to use in our paid search copy. I know the engines will have us do a variety of headlines and descriptions, and then it optimizes based upon the customer's click-through rate. Same thing too with Demandbase in terms of various creative images we have, also to different intro copy, and it will actually look at the machine learning there to determine what the customer gets shown and what's going to generate the highest value for the customer. Other interesting things, I had attended Adweek in New York last year, which is kind of the Super Bowl for advertising, and some of the things like Amazon is doing with their Amazon Sports, and they were utilizing AI for some of the F1 races to determine, and NASCAR races to determine when the race car driver might run out of fuel and creating extra value there. I know our security system, instead of just saying, hey, there's an alert, there's a security system, they're starting to add in captions, raccoon going across the driveway, or raccoon at the back deck, or a cat crossing the driveway. So it's actually looking at who it might be and telling you what it is, as opposed to you just having to check the camera. It'll alert you ahead of time. So interesting developments. And I think really it's what's best for the customer and how is it going to enhance their activity with you, and how's your brand going to resonate with it.
Yeah, all really well put. I think it's a wide open frontier out there. And one of the, interesting enough, a couple insights that came out of last night's class, I took a poll just to get some more thoughts on AI sentiment and AI literacy and skills. And one of the questions I asked students is if they think that AI, is it making marketers more average, or is it actually making them more creative? And interestingly enough, 75% of my students said that AI is making them more average rather than creative. And so that actually correlated with another study that was done saying that when AI was used in this meeting room, there were 40% less ideas generated. And then when they took out the AI from the room and it was just open-ended discussion and everything, there were 40% more ideas, I guess, as you could say on the flip. So I think the main point, in addition to everything you all said, is that it's exciting and it's a vast frontier, but I think that the focus on equipping marketers with AI skills and literacy is equally as important. So with so many new things and tools and technologies, it's equally as important to train them up on how to leverage it to the best. So appreciate the input and insights there on AI. Any other thoughts or questions spark up on that?
Yeah, Brad, one other thing that I would add, and I think this might have come from the conference that David and I attended, but I thought it was a profound statement about AI, is that it cannot replace, and you cannot allow it to replace, critical thinking, strategic thinking, and creative brainstorming. It's really a tool to help accelerate and accelerate ideas and synthesize information. But if you allow it to, replace the critical thinking, the strategic thinking, especially from a marketing perspective, you're really going to kind of take the human element out of things. And also, I think it's important for college students to think about what that means, right? Like you're in college to learn and to retain information and retain that knowledge. AI can very easily take that away from you if you're misusing it. And I think that was one of the things that stuck with me in that conference.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was an interesting point of discussion. Like last night we were saying, some of the skills are already being lost in translation, I feel like, with just AI. So over reliance on it and using that as a crutch is, yeah, definitely not the way to go in place of developing those skills. So yeah, appreciate the input there. A couple more questions to wind down this panel. One student asked, what advice would you give to maybe a small e-commerce team or a small marketing team? Essentially, I think what this question is getting at is if you had to boil it down, like what is critical for a marketer to focus on, even if they had, way less scale to the extent or efforts here at Boeing, what makes a marketer and a good one at that. So I'll leave that one open-ended if anyone wants to just jump in on this one.
I'm happy to jump in on this one. I would say, embrace the environment that you're in. If you're in a small marketing team, really thrive in it. And I say that because one of the things that I learned prior to coming to the Boeing company, I worked for a small business. It was a small sporting goods company. And if you've ever had the opportunity to work in an entrepreneurial environment where you wear so many different hats, you understand the lifeblood of this marketing asset or that marketing asset, or how it connects to product, how it connects to finance, et cetera. Once you better understand the system, you will find your level of creativity, enhance immensely. And I think that I have found that I've been able to apply a lot of that to a big company like Boeing. And even in a big company like Boeing, and we've talked about it, we're still pretty resource constrained. We operate on pretty tight marketing budgets at the end of the day. And we are challenged every single day to be more creative, to be more innovative with our spend, et cetera. And I feel like having had that opportunity in a small marketing organization or in a small business environment helped me so much to better appreciate the environment that I'm in today.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that, Boeing sometimes could be pretty large and a lot of people who could say no. I think if you're at a smaller organization, like David was mentioning, you have the opportunity to be nimble and do a lot of testing because you don't have a lot of people who can say no and have to go through all these different approval processes. So really trying to take advantage of that and, testing and being able to, just get things out there and optimize based upon what's resonating with the customers. That would be a big advantage.
And I'll round that out by adding, because I think this applies to, small businesses, small teams, as well as, large teams and large corporations. Data is your friend. Data is currency. Data is powerful if you know how to leverage it and use it, because numbers don't lie typically, and you need to be able to rely on a source of truth to understand your customers intimately, which I've noted a couple of times, and to really understand where the opportunities and the hot spots are with your go-to-market strategy, and then putting the customer at the center of that.
Yeah, that's great. Appreciate the answers there. And I think for those, listening, no matter where you get your start, right, large company or small, there could be some benefit, right, to having that quick access and depth and breadth of your product and service, and really just being the expert and knowledgeable in that. Because then as you progress in your career, right, and you're open to that career journey, you can just be more well-rounded for wherever it takes you. So appreciate the input there. And then we'll round out with just one more advice-related question for these students that are going to be entering the workforce in the next year or so. What's something maybe you wish you knew when you were going through school, and then now that you're out there living it, or just what advice do you have to these students just getting ready for the workforce?
I'll start. I think networking was something that I wish in retrospect somebody had emphasized with me. I think the more connections you make, especially in the marketing space, it's just going to really open opportunities. It may not be a new job. It could just be a great mentor that you connect with and have, kind of a standing, one-on-one relationship with once a year or every quarter, and you just benefit from that knowledge sharing and just that growth aspect. I think also just, understanding what your passion is, right? We don't always have the opportunity, if you will, to take a job that is directly in line with our passion, but I don't think that that means you should ignore it. That's a personal anecdote from me because I felt like, I spent my entire childhood dreaming about all things aviation, but I kind of went through a phase where I just accepted whatever came my way from a job standpoint, and then had this kind of awakening that like, no, I really love aviation. I need to try to figure out how to pursue that and align my career. And I think you just have to be, brave in that sense and do your best to follow those passions. And if it's marketing, maybe you're also passionate about sports, and I'm sure there's an avenue there for folks. So network and just, really tap into what you're passionate about.
Stacey, you want to?
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say be open, making sure that you keep up, especially in marketing, it's ever changing. Lots of new technologies, lots of new, for advertising, a lot of new ad treatments, customer changes, things like that. So just be open to continuing education, whether it's formalized, whether it's reading white papers, going online, taking some webinars, et cetera. Just be open and making sure that you're able to keep up with what's going on. And don't let the world leave you behind, because the only thing for certain is change. So making sure that you're adaptable to that.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that Stacey and Stephen just said. I think the one thing that I might add in there that I find to be valuable is be able to tell a story. And that can apply in so many different ways. It can apply when you're doing a job interview. It can apply when you're working on a customer campaign. It can apply when you're presenting to peers or superiors, what have you. Know your content, know your audience, find creative ways to engage with them, and be authentic and make it personal. And when you can do that, I think you'll see a world of opportunities open up for you.
Awesome. Yeah, all this advice was golden. I know it's going to resonate really well with all my students. So that's going to wrap up this panel. And again, I just want to say, huge thank you and shout out to Stephen, Stacey, and David for the time spent. They're going to be, super appreciative, and we're going to love to just learn from you all. So thanks again for the conversation. And I know these type of conversations in general really can make a well-rounded educational experience. So as they continue to march forward on their path to obtaining that marketing degree, it's conversations like this that make the difference. So thanks again for all the time.